Are you all waiting for me now?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Welcome everyone to our special Economic Development and Innovation Committee meeting. I'm sorry, every time we go live, my camera just cuts out. We've got one continuing topic on our agenda today. It's the public realm study. Specifically, we're looking at the special events permitting process. And so I will kick it over to staff, I guess, Mr. Raleigh.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Melton, Mayor, and members of the committee. We are going to get into, yes, thank you, Whitney, for beginning to share the screen. So this meeting, we will be reviewing several of the items that the committee tasked us with taking some additional looks at during the August meeting. So Whitney, if you could advance the slide. So you know much of this history. This will represent the third committee level conversation on the topic of the public realm studies recommendations, which began back in June. Today's discussion will be limited specifically to small scale activations, talking specifically about the tier structure and proposed fees associated with the various tier structures. We'll also talk about outdoor seating and a very innovative plan, I think, to address permanent construction of some additional seating for restaurants in the downtown, potentially other areas. And then also, last but certainly not least, a continued discussion on our pursuit of a large-scale LED screen and options associated with that to facilitate hosting large outdoor gatherings. So without further ado, I will turn the presentation over to Whitney Schoenfeld, our Interim Director of Emergency Management and Special Events.
Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I'm Whitney Schoenfeld with Emergency Management Special Events and sometimes hospitality as well. So since we last presented to you all last month, we have seen a return of events, which is definitely exciting to see. Pictured on the screen here is Councilmember Melton and Councilmember Fort, who attended the International Food Festival at the end of August. And then most recently this past weekend, we had Hopscotch Music Festival. So it was exciting to see events return, but also return to Fayetteville Street, which we know has been an area that has struggled throughout the pandemic. So some follow-up items from questions that the council had posed to us at the last meeting. I did just want to address those quickly. And I know that this also came up at the most recent city council meeting, but a question about why our special event fees are in place to begin with. And I know that Marshall had mentioned that we have a cost recovery model, and really ultimately the fees are in place to just simply hold people accountable. We also had some questions about our refund process and how long that takes, and events that were canceled in 2020 and whether or not they have received a refund. We did have more conversations with finance, and typically based on timely approvals and completed supporting documentation, that process takes approximately 10 business days. They did mention that checks are typically cut on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so depending on when something is approved is when the check would be issued and then mailed to the recipient. The only recent special event that requested a refund, we looked into it, and upon the request and when it was issued and then cashed was 11 days. So we're happy that they were able to get that funding back in a reasonable amount of time. And then the last part was events that were canceled in 2020. So again, what we did is apply those application fees to future event dates. And I will say that multiple events have rescheduled multiple times based on the different mass gathering restrictions that the state had laid out. So rather than refunding an event, having them apply, pay again, cancel, refund, reschedule, we continue to roll those over, and we'll continue to do that until the event can actually happen. And I know that I did mention that if anybody did want to go ahead and receive a refund, to reach out to us. But as of yesterday, or I guess this was dated 2 days ago, but I can say that as of today, we still have not received any additional refund requests. So moving into our updated recommendations, and we did provide a backup memo that hopefully you all have to provide a little bit more context to the tiers that we've created. So per your recommendation, we have created a third tier. And before I get into the example criteria outlined on this slide, I do want to emphasize that a lot of these different tiers, it's really all about impact to the community and less about numbers and what you necessarily see on a slide. Ultimately, whenever anybody would apply to have a special event, no matter what tier, no matter what scale, our office is going to review those event components and their event plan to figure out which tier best serves their event. But again, these are kind of used as guiding examples. So tier 1 is going to be our events that have a greater impact on the community. It's going to involve closures of multiple city blocks. It could inconvenience numerous residents and establishments within a certain footprint. There is the potential for noise impacts. So if they have a large stage, large speakers, an attendance of 500 or more people, and any significant event infrastructure that would require fire permitting. So those are going to be our larger scale tier 1 example events. So then tier 2 is going to be our lower impact events. These are going to close one city block and or an off-street venue. So those would be our downtown plazas, for instance. We put there's a potential for noise impacts here as well. They're going to affect a minimal number of residents and establishments within their footprint and hopefully have no significant event infrastructure that would require a fire permit, because then we can move quicker through the process. And then we have our tier 3 events, which again was proposed by the ED&I committee last month. We are proposing to use any of our off-street plazas, and so that would not require any road closure whatsoever, with an attendance of fewer than 200 people, affecting a minimal number of businesses and residents, and no significant infrastructure that would require a fire permit. And so the reasons for these change again is just to evolve with the current day. We want to make sure that our processes can meet the demands of the community and those smaller groups that want to have events, but who may be intimidated or not familiar with the events permitting process. So next I want to talk about our deadlines and fees. And I will say that it's important to note that the intent of our deadlines is less about staff time and the amount of time that it takes to move an event through the permitting process with various city departments. It's really to allow the event organizer sufficient time to plan and execute successful quality events. If we have everything we need from an event organizer, we can move pretty quickly through the permitting process. So I just want to note that it's more about providing them sufficient time, depending again on the scale of their event. So what we have proposed here for our tier 1 events is keeping it consistent with the current 90-day deadline for our festivals. Tier 2 is going to be that 45-day deadline. And then again, at your recommendation, we've created that tier 3 with the 30-day deadline. We did have conversations with RPD, and they did mention that due to the short time frame that they may be unavailable to provide a presence at any of these events, but that on-duty officers would always be available in the event that something should arise. And then along with the shortened deadlines, we've also reduced the fees. Tier 1 remains as is. Tier 2 would see a 50 to 75% reduction in fees. And then for tier 3, we are proposing to entirely eliminate the special event application fee, venue rental fee, and permitting fee. If they did get to hire RPD or need any fire permitting, we can always have further conversations about waiving of those fees. But for today, we're at least proposing to waive fees from our office. So based on everything I just shared with you, this again is just a chart to show you visually what that looks like, showing the different tiers, showing the different venues, and then anything highlighted in yellow are proposed fee changes for that tier 2 and tier 3. So hopefully you can see the reduction of fees in some places, and the elimination of fees in other places. So next steps for small scale events and events in general. In the last week's manager's update, we did share that the notice of funding availability is open for special events that our office permits. So round 1 of applications is open and ready for people to apply. And we did think that a qualifying cost to obtain funding would be to supply barriers, tables, chairs, other kind of event infrastructure at those events. Rather than taking away business from the private sector, we would really just encourage people to kind of use that funding available for those rental materials that they might need at a special event. And we continue to work on sharing site plan examples, again, really for our amateur event organizers who may have not had an event on Fayetteville Street, Glenwood South, anywhere throughout the city. So with that, that is all I have for small scale events, and I will open it up for questions and feedback. And I will unshare my screen so you can all see each other.
Councilmember Branch.
I have one question. It's actually on the backup material, on the top of the second page, where you talk about events not included are required for the following, and this is for tier 2. The last point is closure for more than 1 block, because I know for tier 2 you can close at least 1 block. For tier 3, you're not able to close a block, but it doesn't list that under that point. So I wanted to bring that out. Or am I missing something?
Can you remind me what page you said?
It's on the second page of the Word doc. General event tier 3, and it's bullet 2. Events cannot include or require any of the following. And
So you're saying,
the part about block closure isn't there.
Yeah, we can certainly add that in.
Other than that, with the changes and everything, I'm fine. I just want to make sure that we're clear that you can't close any blocks off under tier 3.
Of course.
That's all I have.
Anybody else?
I just want to say that this is what we were hoping to see, so thank you for bringing this back to us.
All right, so it looks like for next steps, council's going to have to approve the tier 2 and tier 3 fees. So I guess we would accept a motion to recommend staff's proposal for tier 2 and tier 3 to the full council.
So moved.
Seconded by Councilmember Branch. All in favor? Okay, that was unanimous. We move on to the next section of the presentation, outdoor seating.
Good afternoon, committee members. Pat Young with Planning and Development. I have been asked to lead a group. I'm sorry, outdoor seating. Wendy, I'll let you talk about this first, then move on to LED screens. My apologies.
Sounds good. I was like, if you want to take this one on too, you can have it.
You got it. I could probably do it, but I think you got it. Thanks, Wendy.
All right, so before I dive into our outdoor seating, just for everyone watching, I do want to remind people of the different terminology that we use for outdoor seating. So the first is a parklet, and a parklet is when we convert an on-street parking space into a space that is open for the community. Again, that's what you'll see outside of Deco, and it is much like a park where it is open to the community. The next term is a streetery, which is what we are now calling a lot of the businesses that are using parking spaces and converting those into spaces to accommodate patrons of their business. And then the last one is a pedlet, which is where a business is converting the parking space into an alternate form of pedestrian flow and they are using the sidewalk as an extension of their business. And again, moving people who would normally traverse the sidewalk into a parking space. I will mention that a pedlet is not our preferred method moving forward. There are some concerns with individuals who may be in a wheelchair or those that are visually impaired. So just again, wanted to give that context to anybody watching. So currently we have 7 streeteries and 2 pedlets. And again, this process did exist prior to the pandemic. It just wasn't highly used, but we had 2 parklets previously. And again, that is Deco and Virtuals as well. So we continue to work with all of these businesses, have conversations, meet with them to talk about their plans for the future and what they want to see for outdoor seating. And then obviously at the most recent ED&I meeting and then subsequent council meeting, you all proposed no changes through the end of this year, and then we waived fees for the remainder of the fiscal year. So you told us to be bold and innovative and less red tape. So hopefully you'll see on this next slide that we're trying to make things a lot less sticky for our businesses. So what we are proposing to do is to take the burden off of our businesses and put that work and expense on the city to build streeteries for our local businesses and help support them. So what we are proposing is that the city will build a platform and the walls, so getting rid of the orange and white Jersey barriers you see pictured here. We will also supply wheel stops, which are the mechanism to prevent a car from getting too close to a streetery or a parklet or a pedlet. And then we would still look to the business or the applicant to supplement the streetery with tables, chairs, plants, other kind of decor items. But we would take on the bulk of that expense. And what at the work session at 4 o'clock, Budget and Management Services is going to also share this idea with you as the council for how we would like to use some of the American Rescue Plan funding. To be eligible for this, you would have to obviously be using a parking space within public right-of-way. So we do realize that some businesses may not want the streetery that we are proposing to build, if they want something more custom, if they don't want something that looks like all of the other ones that we are planning to build. So we are still working with the Urban Design Center on design standards. Those currently sit with the DRA because we obviously want to make sure that we're getting community engagement and feedback on what those standards are before we would implement them. And then again, at the council work session at 4 o'clock, a topic for all of you will be to talk about funding opportunities for ARPA. And again, outdoor seating will be presented as an option there. Our idea, if we are given the green light to move forward, is that transportation would manage the contract to build these streetery platforms and walls. We are also going to be working with the city attorney's office to figure out what that agreement looks like with any business that wants to participate in this program, and then ultimately make any necessary code updates regarding streeteries. I will say for the future, and this isn't something that we necessarily need to dive too deep into today because we don't have fees to propose for outdoor seating, but we do want to look ahead to the future in years to come for what the cost would ultimately be to use right-of-way for these extension of the businesses. What we are looking at doing is year 1, which wouldn't be until fiscal year 2023, would just be charging an application fee. And that would be a nominal application fee and not actually charging use for any right-of-way, because we realize that a business who wants a streetery is going to be putting a lot of their own money and investment into making the streetery how they want it to be, again, with tables, chairs, artwork, and whatnot. So it would just be an application fee. And then in year 2, we would look at a reduced encumbrance fee. And then year 3 and beyond is when we would look at a 100% charge. But the earliest any streetery, any business would see any charges would again not be until fiscal year 23. And with that, I will take any questions related to outdoor seating. And stop sharing my screen.
Before we jump into questions, I just wanted to raise an issue for the committee. It was the intent of this special meeting for us to address the event recommendations that we were not comfortable with at the last meeting. I don't believe it was our intent to go over this outdoor seating stuff today or the LED screen. And actually, I believe what council voted on at our last council meeting, I pulled the agenda item, is for staff to bring the LED screen options back to the full council. In the interest of time, we have a work session in about 25 minutes. I don't know that we have time to go over this today, nor do I think it was clear that this would be on the agenda. I pulled the agenda for today's meeting and it does just say public realm study. So I think it's fine if we want to take it up. But my recommendation would be to have this outdoor seating stuff come back to our next committee meeting, because we've already extended the emergency stuff out through the end of the year. So there's really not a time sensitivity with this issue right now. And then the LED stuff was supposed to come back to the full council. So that's my concern, Mayor.
Yeah, I do have a question though that wasn't answered. Okay, if a business isn't able to have a streetery, are they still able to get a grant for outdoor dining or not? And here's what I'm thinking. There are some streets that are one way, Wilmington Street, for instance, where there are plenty of businesses, that state maintained road, state owned. Can they still get some type of permit for outdoor eating or dining, I should say? Or are we just talking about streeteries here? So as Councilmember Melton said, I guess we weren't supposed to take that up today, but that's something for y'all to think about. And I know at one point in time, I had asked if we could contact NCDOT and ask if there's any way that we could do outdoor dining or streeteries on some of these streets. So I don't know if that ever happened, but I just want to bring that up, and maybe that's food for thought or something to consider when we take this up. If the chair thinks we should wait and take this up at the next meeting, totally fine with that.
My suggestion would be that we resume this outdoor seating at our next regular council meeting. We have some time now because, sorry, at our committee meeting, sorry. We have some time now because we extended the emergency stuff through the end of the year, and these net regulation was supposed to expire in October. So I would prefer that we take this up at the next meeting. That gives us some time to really digest it and talk about it. And I know we're running up on the next, we have a work session coming up, and there was a request for us to get out here by 3:45, so some time to transition. And then the LED stuff, council voted to authorize staff to find funding sources and bring options back to full council. The presentation, having just skipped through, looks like it's the options. The funding source isn't in here. So maybe, Mr. Young, if it's okay, if you could add this as a special item to our next council meeting, this presentation with the funding options. I think that's what council voted on at our last council meeting.
Yes, certainly, sir. And my apologies for any confusion.
No, that's fine. Is everybody good with that on the committee? All right,
Yes.
so we have addressed then the one issue we had, which precipitated this special meeting, which was to get the recommendations out for the small scale events so that at our next meeting, full council meeting, we can approve those and that process can start. We will continue our discussion on outdoor seating at our next committee meeting, and staff will bring the LED recommendations and options for funding to us at our next council meeting, which was what council approved last time. Good. All right, well, thanks everyone for throwing all this stuff together so quickly. And we've got to get to a work session in just a few minutes, so we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.